If you're leading anything, a business, a ministry, a nonprofit, a church, you have definitely felt it. That quiet, persistent internal pressure. You look across your organization, you see real momentum, some incredible growth possibilities, and then this sobering realization hits. The sustainability of your whole mission hinges on people who are not quite fully prepared to carry that next level of responsibility yet.
That tension is absolutely universal. But what we often misunderstand, I think, is the source of the danger. The threat isn't a lack of raw talent. I mean, potential is everywhere. The true organizational crisis is a lack of structured pathways. Without a clear intentional map for developing capacity, your highest performers often burn out, and the entire organization just stalls due to internal uncertainty and, well, bottlenecks.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We pulled together a deep stack of organizational wisdom for this deep dive, focusing really intensely on that operational shift. The shift required to move leadership development from being, accidental.
Right, when high performers just happen to emerge.
Exactly. To being predictable and intentional. And our sources are unanimous on this. This shift, it multiplies your capacity dramatically, it accelerates growth by removing those bottlenecks, and it turns leader development into a genuine measurable competitive advantage.
Precisely. And our mission today is really to give you a strategic blueprint, to quickly understand the foundational principles you need for building these sustainable internal leadership pathways, to ensure your organization thrives over time, and critically, to prevent the burnout that just plagues your most vital leaders.
So let's start by defining our terms, because we're not talking about some one-off training course. A leadership pipeline isn't a program you run once a year. The research describes it as a living system.
And that is the crucial distinction. You really need to think of it as the operating system of every thriving, scaling organization. When we look closely at successful movements, this living system, it consistently has 4 integrated components. It intentionally discovers hidden potential, it systematically develops necessary skills, it creates real opportunities for ownership, and it measures tangible growth and impact. When that system is healthy and integrated, it just accelerates everything, from innovation to team trust and, of course, long-term scalability.
And when we talk about urgency, timing matters more now than ever. The sources all seem to indicate that the speed of succession and change cycles is rapidly shrinking across all sectors. You simply cannot afford to wait for leaders to emerge organically anymore.
Exactly right. When a clear internal pipeline is missing, you are forced into reactive, expensive external hiring and rushed internal promotions, both of which eat directly into your hard-won momentum and often lead to a poor fit. Our notes really stress that many established organizations are aging faster than they are innovating their leadership base. If you rely solely on instinct or, say, the charisma of your current top tier, you will constantly be trying to catch up. You have to intentionally cultivate leaders from within, and you need to start installing that system now.
Now, here's a really interesting connection for me, because this structured development links directly to that silent internal crisis we mentioned, which is burnout.
It does. I mean, burnout is often perceived as a personal failure, a failing of effort or passion. But our research shows it's frequently a symptom of a missing pipeline. It's a structural flaw, not a character flaw. And this insight is ancient. Think about Moses in Exodus 18. Jethro, his father-in-law, gave him this strikingly blunt warning because he was trying to carry all the judicial and administrative weight himself. He said, "What you are doing is not good. You will wear yourselves out." The pipeline, the deliberate sharing of the load by appointing capable leaders, that is God's antidote to that overextension and the exhaustion that comes with it.
And that structural failure, it inevitably leads directly to what the sources call the plateau problem.
This is such a predictable pattern. Organizations plateau when their growth surpasses the capacity of the current leadership structure. The classic theological insight here comes from Acts 6. The early church was experiencing this explosive numerical growth, but they hit a logistical and, frankly, a political bottleneck. The Greek-speaking widows were being overlooked in the daily food distribution.
And instead of the apostles just adding more logistical tasks to their already strained schedules, which would have just exhausted them and diluted their focus, they implemented a pipeline solution.
That's right. They intentionally appointed 7 capable leaders, the first deacons, to own and manage that complex administrative responsibility. And the result was instantaneous. The multiplication of leaders led directly to the multiplication of disciples because the apostles were freed up to focus on their unique mission. And the logistical burden was resolved. It just shows you how multiplication accelerates mission by removing the bottleneck. The whole flow of ministry was restored.
And if we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, It becomes clear that leadership multiplication is not some modern management technique from a business school. It's a profound ancient pattern. Good organizational practice and good theology, they align perfectly here because multiplication is just woven into the original design for any sustainable movement.
Oh, we see evidence of strategic, intentional pipelines all throughout historical narratives in Scripture. It was never spontaneous. It was always strategic and, frankly, resource intensive. Take the transition from Moses to Joshua, for example.
Right, Joshua wasn't just appointed the day Moses died. Our sources really emphasize that Joshua was shaped through years of dedicated apprenticeship. He was present in the tent of meeting, he observed Moses' courage in battle, his vulnerability during crises, his prayer life, and even his moments of failure and judgment.
He was formed through proximity and observation long before that mantle was passed with blessing and clarity. That is a documented pipeline in action, and it just confirms the principle that presence precedes promotion.
Or look at the model of Elijah and Elisha. What's particularly fascinating about that pipeline is that it exponentially expands the mission, far beyond the original leader's legacy.
Absolutely. Elisha performed double the recorded miracles of Elijah. This demonstrates that when you implement a strong pipeline, you aren't just replicating your current capacity. You are deepening, accelerating, and multiplying the entire scope of the work. It really expands the mission beyond the original leader's own gifts.
But the ultimate model for formations is often missed, I think, because it was so relational. Jesus didn't primarily run a mass classroom. He ran a deep pipeline.
His method was rooted in what you could call proximity before deployment. He formed leaders by inviting them into his daily life. I mean, think about the conversations on the road, the shared meals, the immediate correction, the commissioning. The goal was relational investment, which results in handcrafted leaders, not, mass-produced graduates from a seminar.
Yeah.
That relational density is the true engine of formation.
And that whole idea of generational sustainability is captured perfectly in Paul's four-generation vision, which we find in 2 Timothy 2.2.
Yeah.
This single verse really serves as the spine for movement sustainability across time.
It does. Paul writes to Timothy, "What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." That's 4 generations in one sentence. You have Paul to Timothy, Timothy to faithful leaders, and those faithful leaders to others. Our notes stress that without this conscious generational transfer, the mission inevitably stalls or just dies in 1 or 2 generations.
And what really stands out to me in Paul's framework is his selection criteria. When he's looking for the next generation of leadership to invest in, it wasn't based on raw talent or who was the most charismatic speaker.
No, not at all. The key selection criterion focuses intensely on character. He selects faithful men. And this choice, it reveals a profound insight. Sustainability is the true goal-preparing leaders you may never meet, leaders who are several steps removed from your direct influence. The measure of true faithfulness isn't your current success, it's the quality and longevity of the leaders you equip to carry that torch forward.
Okay, now let's move into the truly practical framework, what our sources call the mentorship map. This is basically the 5-stage journey that every emerging leader takes. And if you don't intentionally guide it, it's going to happen haphazardly and, well, often stall out.
And the first crucial stage is identifying potential. This means seeing past the surface polish and seeing what God sees, which is possibility. We often look for the leader who is ready-made, but the sources tell us to focus on faithfulness over charisma and teachability over raw talent. Leaders are rarely, if ever, ready-made. They're discovered and then they're forged.
Right, so if you are relying on these subjective charisma checks, you are likely missing the quiet, high-character individuals who are truly capable of multi-generational impact. And once you see that potential, you move quickly into the second stage, which is early formation.
This phase is so foundational. It is identity-driven, not merely task-driven. Character is the absolute first curriculum. Think of Joseph, who spent years learning integrity and obscurity in a prison, or Moses, who spent 40 years learning meekness in Midian before he was entrusted with the Exodus. Without that foundational shaping, learning humility, delayed gratification, inner resilience, any future influence is going to be incredibly fragile. The risk of skipping this stage is, well, it's catastrophic failure when the pressure inevitably ramps up.
That's a powerful warning. Okay, moving on. The third stage is skill development. Here we shift from shaping character and identity to building specific, necessary ability through the dual tools of teaching and coaching.
And this distinction is crucial. Teaching provides clarity, the what and the why. It's information transfer. Coaching, however, closes the gap between knowing and doing. It's behavior modification and translating knowledge into actionable steps. You can teach a team member how to run a project budget, but you have to coach them through that inevitable mid-project crisis where they need to make a tough call.
And the most effective technique for this transition is something called guided practice. How do the sources recommend doing that well?
Well, it's about creating a safe, low-stakes environment where mistakes are learning opportunities, not capital offenses. Again, Jesus modeled this perfectly. He sent the disciples out two by two, ensuring they had peer support, and then he rigorously debriefed with them afterward. In a modern context, this looks like co-leading a small team or shadowing a critical meeting, or maybe co-managing a non-critical budget. It allows them to form confidence because they are fully supported and fully accountable.
Okay, stage 4 is real opportunities. This is where the accelerated growth happens, because a leader grows most when they are entrusted with genuine responsibility that has real weight. Our material highlights a really important difference between an invitation like, join us for this meeting, and a real opportunity, lead this critical initiative.
That differentiation is absolutely key. Responsibility creates ownership, and ownership creates that intense personal growth. A real opportunity means entrusting them with a budget, giving them ownership of a whole ministry area, or making them the primary decision maker for a project with high internal visibility. You have to be courageous enough to release control and trust them, understanding that mistakes are inevitable, but they serve as the most effective tools for growth and future maturity.
And finally, we arrive at the 5th stage, measuring progress. Evaluation has to be a collaborative partnership, right? Designed to clarify growth, not to be a judgment.
Yes, healthy evaluation requires looking through a dual lens, biblical metrics and practical metrics. So biblical metrics focus on internal transformation and health, fruitfulness, faithfulness with the small, unseen things, and servant-hearted humility. Practical metrics, on the other hand, focus on external effectiveness, communication clarity, emotional resilience under pressure, and measurable problem-solving ability. Using both of those lenses creates a holistic, robust picture of the leader's total development.
As organizations successfully build these pipelines, we really need to issue a serious warning about the most common pitfall that destroys the whole system from within. And that is power hoarding.
This is the retention of decision-making authority, or the withholding of influence and resources by the senior leader. It's often unintentional, but power hoarding inevitably stalls the pipeline at the top layer, stunting the emerging leaders and critically limiting the mission's reach.
Right. And Jesus himself explicitly warned against this kind of authoritarian, non-serving leadership in Matthew 20.26. The antidote is what the research calls power stewardship.
Stewardship just means intentionally sharing responsibility and gradually releasing control to prepared leaders. It's an act of faith and trust. When power is stewarded rather than hoarded, the pipeline thrives because the senior leader is actively multiplying their own influence by creating capacity across the entire organization, rather than being the sole decision maker.
And since we are dealing with human beings, the sources remind us that failure is, well, it's inevitable. You mentioned historical examples like Peter denying Christ and David's grievous sin. If a leader in the pipeline fails, what framework must the system have for a response?
The critical question isn't if failure happens, but how the pipeline is structured to respond to it. Our notes highlight that the framework has to hold grace and accountability in perfect tension. Restoration must be possible. A leader who has experienced significant failure, repentance, and restoration often emerges stronger, far more empathetic, and becomes a more effective mentor for the next generation. We often try to protect our pipelines from failure, but the strongest systems integrate the lessons learned from failure right into their curriculum.
So if you bring this whole discussion full circle, back to the listener's long-term vision, we realize the leadership pipeline is truly about legacy, not just efficiency.
That's it. Leadership is fundamentally influence, but leader-making is legacy. Every leader has to eventually confront the sobering truth that their personal leadership has a time limit and a capacity limit. But reproduce leadership, the system you build, that does not. Your ultimate legacy is measured not by your own direct accomplishments, but by the quality, resilience, and longevity of the leaders you have systematically formed who will carry the mission forward long after you're gone.
That intentionality is the game changer. The ultimate transformation is the shift from that accidental approach, the reactive move of saying, let's find leaders to help the ministry,
Yeah.
to the intentional strategic vision, let's build leaders who become the ministry itself.
And the decision to build a pipeline is both strategic and profoundly spiritual. It protects existing leaders from exhaustion, it prevents those organizational plateaus, and it ensures genuine continuity and growth across multiple generations.
So we'll leave you with one final question to challenge your assumptions. Based on Paul's vision of multi-generational faithfulness, if true faithfulness means preparing leaders who will teach others, how much of your current weekly schedule is dedicated to tasks that will genuinely advance your impact 4 generations out? What specific thing could you delegate or release control of this week to intentionally start that crucial multiplication cycle?